This video provides guidance on how to read empirical research articles in political science. I'm going to start by describing the structure of these articles and then offer some tips on how to read them efficiently. Academic research articles are some of the most difficult things you're going to have to read, in part because you're not really their intended audience. These articles are written by scholars for other scholars who study the exact same thing, and unfortunately, they aren't written for clarity. That said, they do tend to have a structure that can help you break them down and extract their key points. While every article is different, in general, research articles have 6 or 7 parts. The abstract is a one-paragraph summary of the article. Sometimes it is labeled abstract. Sometimes it just appears offset at the beginning of an article. And unfortunately, some journals don't actually require abstracts, so it's missing. The abstract should include the most essential information on the article. It usually starts with a research question, in this case, why cultural differences are sometimes politically relevant and sometimes are not. It then often explains why the question is important, for example, because there is debate or they are going against a pre-existing theory on the issue. Will then offer the author's hypothesis, what their argument is, what they're testing in this particular case. It oftentimes will describe the method. Here, it's a natural experiment. Here, they are using unique protest event data. And it will often tell you what the results of the study actually are. In this case, which refugees are most likely to prefer to return home. If you're doing your own background research on a topic, a good abstract will tell you whether this article is worth reading or not. All articles then have an introduction. Like the abstract, the introduction should be a summary of the entire article. It just has a little bit more detail. Instead of one paragraph, we have a page and a half. It's not always labeled introduction, but they all serve the same purpose. When you're reading academic articles for class, you always want to read the abstract and the introduction carefully. Good introductions will tell you almost everything you need to know about the research. The next section of an article is typically a literature review. This is almost never called literature review. What this section does is describe who studied this issue before and what they concluded. Good literature reviews establish what theories or alternate explanations exist about the topic. This then sets up a description of the author's hypotheses and research design. The hypothesis will be the test that the author has chosen. In this case, if refugees are exposed to violence, they are less likely to want to return home. The research design then helps take into consideration the alternate explanations that were established in that literature review. Authors will also sometimes provide needed background information or context on a topic here, like the colonial history of Southern Africa, for example. Sometimes you want to read the literature review, and sometimes you can skip it. It depends in part on your familiarity with the topic. After you've read several on the same topic, you can realize they're similar, but you oftentimes need to read a few to really get that initial understanding. It also depends on your purpose in reading. If you're writing your own research paper, you might want to read someone else's literature review on the similar topic to get a sense of what sources you should look for in your background research. After this, there will be some presentation of the author's research design, methodology, and the data that they use to test their hypothesis. Here, Posner describes a natural experiment. These sections are often literally labeled research design and data. As students, you can often skim this section. It is very important, but it might be more detail than you really need. It might just describe things that you actually haven't learned about yet, or just be too confusing. Authors will then present their results and analysis. For statistical research, there will be tables and graphs that you need to review. Other types of research may have historical narratives or other descriptions here. It really varies depending on the article. You should review this section to make your own judgment on whether the author's results are as strong as they say they are in the introduction. Papers always end with a conclusion. This usually comments on areas for future research or policy implications. You almost never need to read this. So, how should you read these articles? First, read the abstract, introduction, and section titles carefully. For statistical articles, you also need to read the tables and graphs to assess the results. After that, you need to stop, Think about what the authors are actually testing and how you can best evaluate that. This is really going to vary based on the topic and methodology. I've provided some questions you can use to guide your thinking in these slides and in the assignments that I've given you on outlining articles. Then when you next approach the article, take a look and find the answers to those questions. You really shouldn't read straight through, and you definitely don't want to get bogged down in the material, like methodology, that was really written for experts on the field, not necessarily for you. When taking notes, it's best to jot down the answers to the questions that you think are most essential. And then when you're done, I always find it helpful to summarize the article in 1 to 2 sentences that I could actually remember later in class if called on. I hope this helps demystify articles a little bit and help you focus on the essentials as you read them.